report. We did it because we wanted to be constructive and to bring this House together. And I want to make 2 points, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, the fact that this issue has brought the House together. And I want to talk a little bit about that because I think it's the power of this House to stop the Executive on this matter. And secondly, the nature of the retrospection, which is the issue that's caused me, as well as my constituents' cases, to be so passionate about this point. But first, the cross-party unity. Can I pay tribute to the Honourable Member for Aberdeen South, who opened this debate and was the Vice-Chair, and the Honourable Lady for Brentford and Isleworth, and indeed to all the members of the APG, representing 6 parties in this House, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank all those members who spoke in the Finance Bill report stage when we passed that amendment, quite unusually, because we had cross-party support from every side and every political persuasion, both between parties and within parties. And there's a reason why we got that support, Madam Deputy Speaker. In a second. First of all, our constituents who've come to us, and we've seen the damage it's doing to their lives, real lives, but also because there are key principles of democracy at stake. Parliamentary sovereignty, forget the Brexit debate for this minute, parliamentary sovereignty with respect to holding the executive properly to account for the way it taxes our constituents, and secondly, the rule of law. And those issues have brought this House together, and we need today to continue that message and make it clear to the Minister and clear to the Government we aren't going away till this is put right. I give way to my friend.
Thank my honourable friend for giving away. And when he opened up, he was talking about the cross-party support. As my honourable friend will know, when I started the early day motion, whatever it was, about 9-10 months ago, the cross-party support has been astonishing. It's now 148 MPs across all parties, including many members opposite, who supported the early day motion because they really do have concern about around the retrospectiveness, around the fairness. The key is Parliament is really coming together, saying there's a real problem, a real challenge here. Treasury, please look at it. Would my honourable friend agree?
I strongly agree with my honourable friend. I thank him for the work he did in leading that early day motion. But can I say through him to the Minister that it's that cross-party nature and the depth of that support that should make the Minister think today. In a second. Because people have been looking at this House and the way it's been operating rather more closely than they normally do. And they need to know that when this House comes together, the government listens. And it's our constitutional job to make the government listen. And when there's level support and it doesn't, that is an outrage to this House. I give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way, and I agree with him that it's about time governments listen. On the question of retrospective legislation, I always think, regardless of the issue, retrospective legislation can be a dangerous thing in actual fact. In some instances it might be justifiable, but by and large as a principle I think retrospective legislation is a very dangerous thing. And the other thing that has emerged in the issue as I've listened to it is the people that encourage people in their employment to get involved in these schemes should be the people that should be paying up, to use an expression, and not the victim. Would you not agree with me about that?
Can I just point out that interventions must be short, and do remember interventions mean that other people have less time to speak. Sir Edward Davey.
I agree with the honourable gentleman who intervened, and let me take his point onto the substance of my speech, which is about retrospection. And everyone has paid tribute to the Minister, and I join in that. But I would urge him to look at this retrospective issue, and I want to really go through it. We've spoken to tax professionals on the APPG. We've read lots of material on it. And there is a debate about whether aspects of this are retrospective or not, where that retrospection lies. There's one group of taxpayers who are being hit by the loan charge where I think the retrospective nature is proven beyond doubt. And that is those taxpayers, Madam Deputy Speaker, who've had their tax return to the Treasury with DOTAS added, and sometimes even without DOTAS added, but have come clean on everything they've been doing. And HMRC has accepted that, not opened an inquiry, and it's been closed, and time has passed. Now, under the Taxes Administration Act, Section 9 of 1970, we have been giving taxpayers in that situation total protection from the HRC coming back to them. That's been for decades. Indeed, we've signed international conventions to say that is the way individuals should be treated. And here we are going back on that. And to be clear to the Minister, when all the tax professionals we talked about believe this was a transgression in those closed cases. And indeed, I asked them if they could find any example ever on the statute books of a government passing a law to override those taxpayer protections, and they could not. So when the government responded to that clause with their review, their argument against all that advice was that it wasn't retrospective because it was a charge on the loan as of now, the outstanding loan. Now, this is interesting because they've never before proven that loan was income. That was the whole point of this whole debacle. Moreover, that loan was taken out in the past. So you might not call it retrospective, you might call it retroactive. Frankly, it's the same thing for the ordinary person. And so the reply to that amendment in the Finance Bill is simply not good enough. It is wrong. This is a breach in the rule of law, particularly for those people with closed tax years. And at the very, very least, the government should not apply the loan charge to those people. That's the recommendation of the APPG. But then we come to those people with open tax years. Now, Madam Speaker, these are people who, where there's inquiry, sometimes years before, 15, 20 years ago, where it wasn't really clear what it was to many of the taxpayers. There was a little form, and they weren't told what their rights were, what they should do in response to it. They just sat there. So some of them didn't even know there was an open inquiry. And those open inquiries have lasted 4 years. The HMRC doing nothing, as the honourable gentleman said. In a second. And surely this is HMRC incompetence, not taxpayer mistakes. And so they're now paying because HMRC couldn't administer the tax system over that period and have tried and failed to get the law right. I'm sorry, you can't come now and penalise our constituents with tax bills of tens of thousands of pounds because HMRC couldn't do their job properly. That's not acceptable. I could wait on Davey.
Honourable member for giving way. As he rightly points out, HMRC has been looking at disguised remuneration since the late 90s and has had open hundreds of thousands of cases. Mary Aston at the Treasury Committee said, at the time, our strategy meant we were not telling taxpayers enough about what we were doing on their cases. So we will have had an opportunity to open an inquiry or an assessment, but we recognised that that strategy meant that we were not communicating regularly enough to keep them in the picture. Does he agree with me that if that was done, then people could have dealt with those cases and paid up immediately and not had tens of thousands, and in my case, in my constituency, hundreds of thousands of pounds to pay back?
The Honourable Lady is precisely right. And that is what I think has offended people. And so, while technically those people with open tax years, it's not retrospection, technically, in practice, and frankly in morality, it is. And one of the things that I will pursue generally after this experience, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the use of open tax inquiries by HMRC. This goes against the whole spirit of the 1970 Taxes Management and Tax Administration Act, and frankly against the spirit of the way the rule of law should operate. And I believe on all sides we stand to defend the rule of law, and when we see an abuse of it, we should get angry, we should get passionate, and we should pledge to do something about it, and I hope we will. And so when one comes to how the government should respond to this, I think they should do a halt, a delay, and make a clear message to people who are suffering mentally and socially with their families and their homes, give them some relief, and just by announcing that today at the dispatch box, it would give people a lot of relief. We've been telling them that their tax bills won't come due till the 31st of January 2020, but nevertheless, if they don't talk to HMRC by this Friday, they could suffer severe penalties according to the guidelines. So putting a delay on would help. Moreover, the judge-led inquiry, I think, is the only way we're going to bring people back together, because that inquiry could look at all aspects of this. However, to speak to the right honourable gentleman, I don't want to leave it there. I think the policy should change now with respect to those people with closed tax years, because there's no debate about that. That is retrospection. That's an abuse of the rule of law. And with those with open tax years, there should be, as our report says, a number of measures taken to reduce the pain and to make sure that they can get their tax affairs in order. This House, Madam Speaker, is against abuse of the tax system. That is wrong. It should be stopped. But this House is also in favour of parliamentary sovereignty, the government listen, and upholding the rule of law and upholding long-standing taxpayer protections.
Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't intend to take all of my time because I'm nowhere near as qualified as the